Every year there's a name we don't quite expect to turn heads, and then they turn a bunch of heads. This year, that's Jalen Nailor. So let's talk about what he's been doing and how he got here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Luke Braun, and let's find some joy today. You can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is an audio listening app, like a lot of people do, or even on YouTube where you can watch it, or you can watch it on Amazon Fire or Roku as well. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app on those smart TVs. And thank you so much for those of you who do listen to the show every single day. My hashtag everydayers. Love you guys so much. Sound off in the comments if you can on YouTube or however you can get at me. I love to hear from you. So today, training camp actually started in earnest. This is the first one, or Wednesday when I'm recording this, is the first one that is open to media. So we actually got to see a little bit about where the team is at. And it seems like a lot of the position battle movement that has happened on OTAs has been sort of reverted. And it sort of reinforces something that Kevin O'Connell said last year, which is that, you know, the OTAs is a time for learning and we don't really start the evaluations till camp. It's a time to try things and be experimental and to kind of say, hey, you're not really being evaluated right now. Chill out and let's all just like try to get better together. And then we'll go back to being evaluated, which is where you get stuff like Joejuan Williams, who didn't take as many. He started with the ones, but sort of lost that job in OTAs. Well, he was back with the ones in nickel packages in Wednesday's practice. It was Byron Murphy would move to the slot in nickel, and then Joejuan Williams would come play outside. Caleb Evans was the other outside corner. There's your starting corners. Everything else was as we knew it. Safeties are still the same. Lewis Cine still running with the twos. Jordan Addison, full participation, if you were wondering there. But perhaps the thing that everybody is talking about... Oh, a couple other notes I wanted to say. Ivan Pace running with the twos over Troy Reeder, which is fascinating. So it's Troy Dye and Ivan Pace are the ones running with the twos to start training camp. And Kene Nwangwu and Ty Chandler are splitting reps with the second team at running back. Of course, Madison going with the ones, which is the same as OTAs, but just, you know, checking in on that. But the star of the day is Jalen Nailor. Jalen Nailor has had a lot of hype over the spring as well. Everybody's marveling about how good he looks, how fast he looks. He got a lot of work with the twos with Nick Mullins and stuff. I believe he even got work with the ones when they went into 3 wide over Jordan Addison, which don't freak out about that. That is the default thing you do at the beginning of camp. Is, you know, give the second-year player time over the first-year player and make him go beat it. But also Jalen Nailor's playing really well, so he's perhaps just earned that opportunity, and that's okay as well. Not that Jordan Addison did nothing anyways. You know, we're just happy to see him out there and healthy and doing stuff, and we'll see how it all shakes out. Long way to go. But Jalen Nailor has been the guy, like every single beat reporter that was at camp on Wednesday was like, yeah, Nailor is my stud of the day. So that's definitely something to watch. Is that real? Like every year there is that guy that totally explodes training camp and we're all super excited about him. And then does it translate into the regular season or, you know, is he going to end up getting that much more reps or whatever? Or is it just kind of, he won in some 7-on-7 drills? There's no pads yet. And they didn't do any 11-on-11 stuff. So the timings are going to favor wide receivers over cornerbacks more. Just generally. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. Anything good that a cornerback does in 7-on-7 with no pads on is like, he's kind of working with his hand tied behind his back. So it's like that much cooler. And vice versa with wide receivers, just something to keep in mind. But also, I mean, on the day-to-day of training camp, and this is how I'm going to do training camp, you're not looking at singular plays. If you are looking at a single play and trying to glean any overall evaluation off of it. If you're trying to say, look at this interception, that quarterback is bad. If you're trying to say that, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. Singular plays in training camp, I mean, singular plays in games too are always going to be too small a sample to really tell you everything, but in training camp especially, it's a lot more about the overall sample. It's the whole thing. If you see somebody continuously making lots of plays against lots of different people, that projects something a little bit more real than, hey, maybe he just had a hot day. Sometimes guys just have real good days, and if they can't sustain it and consistently have real good days, then that one good day they had in August doesn't really take you very far. But with Nailor, who we have not yet talked about on the Everyman series, I would like to do exactly that. I want to take you back to 2004, Lancaster, California, about an hour north of Los Angeles. A baseball field, a very little league t-ball kind of field. A 5-ish-year-old Jalen Nailor is up to bat, and his instruction is hit the ball and run. Don't look at the ball. Don't do anything. You're 5 years old. Don't watch it. Run. Just go. And in doing that, boy, he runs. And all the adults on the field are like, that is the fastest kid on the diamond. And he's the fastest kid in high school. He's the fastest kid in middle school. That is Jalen Nailor's whole thing. Kind of up until he gets into the pros and everybody's fast, he is the fastest, and he's still one of the fastest Vikings. I think he loses out to Kalon Barnes. I think there's another one I'm forgetting that did better. He ran a 4.39. Any other Vikings that ran a 4.39, I'll give you a high five if you name them at me in the comments or whatever. But there's one thing in high school where at this point, the nickname he got on that baseball diamond, they're like, we're going to call this kid Speedy. And, Speedy Nailor, they call him Speedy. And there's this one moment in high school, as a sophomore year, he's on varsity. He's a varsity call-up as a sophomore, and he's running a corner post. So you cut outside, you cut back inside, and he runs it without slowing down at all. That might be something as people who watch the pros, we take a little bit for granted, but for a high school sophomore, that is utterly insane. They all get really, really excited about that. And in that high school, he's sort of the big play maven. He gets like 28 touchdowns over high school or some absurd number like that. And a lot of them just taking the ball and running, right? Just outrunning guys. It's like Moss at Marshall, if you ever watch those highlights, and it's just like, oh, this dude's just a lot faster than everyone. And there is no scheming. You just give him ball and he run and you score. And that's easy. He's going to be that guy a little bit at Michigan State as well, where he ends up. By the time he's actually getting worked in by his second year, he is kind of the big play guy. He's the shot play dude, a little bit of a boomer bust. You think of those guys if you ever play fantasy, those guys that you pick up on the waiver because they're going to catch 2 passes today and you hope one of them's a touchdown. That was sort of Jalen Nailor's role early at Michigan State, and his real college career arc was in learning how to do a little bit more of the down-to-down stuff, blocking, running shorter routes, being more consistent. But instead of focusing there, I want to skip ahead to his time on the Vikings after he gets drafted in, I think he was a 5th rounder. So he tries out for the punt job last year, but he lost it to Ihmir Smith-Marsette to begin. But Ihmir Smith-Marsette, who had that job in the whole preseason, was having some fumble issues, right? He muffed a couple in the preseason, so the Vikings cut him, trade for Jalen Reagor. And it's interesting because as Ihmir Smith-Marsette got cut, it kind of set up Jalen Nailor, who was having a sneaky good preseason again. He was having another good camp. He was kind of set up to take that wide receiver 4 job, but oops, nope, here's Reagor. He's going to get it. And he had it all the way up through December. And he had the punt job and all that, but I think the moment was in that Colts game, that big comeback where Jalen Reagor ran the wrong route once, quit on a route once, caused a couple interceptions. Nailor was the one who would actually end up going in for the rest of the season when another receiver was required. Reagor did not get, I think he maybe got a couple more snaps, but he didn't get much else at all. At that point, Nailor had usurped him on the depth chart, and sure enough, when they started camp this year, he was wide receiver 4 again. So this is this player who is still ascending, and the question is, has he ascended as much as he's going to ascend, or is there more left? And I think the answer to that comes down to what happens in the next couple months. Very exciting to watch that stuff. I've got a couple other Everyman series guys that I want to get at you about, but before I do that, hey, it's fantasy redraft season, and that means it's time for us to talk about eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Pick of the Week. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer, and they have gone into a couple of players who will bring you some picks of the week. We're doing draft stuff right now, but in the season, we'll do waiver wire and stuff. We're going to keep this going. This will be a bit of a tradition. Today, we're talking about Davante Adams and Patrick Mahomes on the turn. If you are picking last and then you pick first in the second round, go grab Davante Adams and then just go get the best quarterback in football. How about that? And the thing about those guys is how that fits together. You have two guys with explosive potential, but also high floors, and that will allow you a little bit more flexibility in later rounds, finding good fits with those two players. And that's what fantasy and real football is about, finding that perfect fit. And hey, eBay Motors knows that that's also what it's about with your car. With over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Whether it's air filters, brakes, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it, and they will help you make sure that it is the right fit for your car. It can be a total jungle to navigate, whether it's the right part for your make and your model, or is that too early of a year, too late of a year, all of that stuff. It's very confusing. eBay Motors can help you sift through all of that stuff. So crank the AC and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you'll always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Thanks again to my hashtag everydayers, those of you who do listen to the show every single day. Appreciate you all so much. Before I get into this next story, I have a quiz for you. I have a quick question. I want you to close your eyes and think of a football state, whatever that means to you, a state that is known for football. If I had to guess what state you thought of, maybe you said Texas, maybe you said Florida, California. I would bet just about anything that you did not say Delaware. Unless you're watching on YouTube and you saw the name on the side of the screen and you knew something about Troy Reeder already. But he is Delaware born and raised, and Delaware knows this about itself. And so when you get players from Delaware, they have this underdog thing, and Troy Reeder has that in spades. He was the pride of Hockessin, Delaware, got a lot of offers from big schools. And for the first few years, he was having a fairly standard run at Penn State as a linebacker. Big Ten, let's do this. But until his last year there, his brother Colby starts to get recruited. His little brother is now old enough to be going through the recruitment process, and he's not as highly recruited, so it's a lot of local stuff. He ends up getting some attention from the University of Delaware. He gets an offer from the University of Delaware. And when he's thinking about if he's going to take that or not, the order of events here is disputed. I don't know who comes up with the idea first, but the idea that Troy Reeder might actually transfer back to Delaware and try to go be closer to home comes up. And maybe what if I went back to Delaware and then you committed to Delaware is the conversation. And whose idea was what or what came up first is sort of nobody really remembers. But either way, the brothers are going to go to Delaware, and this is a cute thing where they get to play together at Delaware for a couple of years. I need to slow it down though and hit the brakes and just emphasize how insane of a move that is. You have a Big Ten budding career as a linebacker. You are going to get every NFL scout is going to go to your pro day. Everybody is going to know what you can do. If you keep playing well, you will get drafted, you will have an NFL if he keeps playing the way he's playing. And instead, out of loyalty to his hometown and then later loyalty to family, he decides to go to the CAA, the Colonial Athletic Association, way smaller school, way fewer eyeballs, and he totally torpedoes his draft stock doing this. He'll play well. He'll be all CAA. I mean, he'll dominate the way you're supposed to against that lesser competition. But it will have the effect that he kind of knew it was going to have, and he just did it anyways. This was not a move of naivete. This was a move of loyalty and fully understanding the cost. That says a lot about a guy. And I think it's a message that he would be pretty glad to send. But once you get into the pre-draft process, then you start to kind of think, okay, what am I going to do about this? Because I'm probably not going to get drafted. And he knew going into the draft, he was probably not getting drafted. Small school guy. He played really, really well, but he knew he was going to have to try to make a team. So before the draft, he was looking at a whole bunch of other teams and all of their rosters and saying, I think I could make them. I don't know if I could make them. And it's funny, he said before, he's like, there's 25 teams you could make, which is an amazing thing to say for a guy that expects to be an undrafted free agent to be like, well, yeah, 3/4 of the teams, I got this. I love that. But either way, he starts looking and kind of ranking the teams because he knows he's going to have to make a decision very fast on where he's playing. And it's not like recruiting where you can say, well, I want to be close to home. You know, you don't really get that luxury as an undrafted free agent. You got to go find an opportunity you can make something of. So all preferences, loyalties, where do I want to play? Where do I want to live? All that stuff out the window. Let's just look at this roster and see which NFL opportunities do I feel good about. And he is drawn to the Los Angeles Rams because they have Corey Littleton there. And Corey Littleton is somebody that he studied a lot in college. You watched him in particular in the 2018 playoffs where the Rams went to the Super Bowl. Corey Littleton was a linebacker there. And sort of modeled a lot of his game after that and said, okay, if they like a guy like that, and I feel like I've modeled myself after Corey Littleton, I like the idea of going and playing for the Rams. Their roster looks like maybe I can make the team there. I like that organization, and I think that I can do something there. So the Rams were number one on his list. Sure enough, about 15 minutes after the final name is called at the NFL draft in 2019, Troy Reader's phone rings, and it's an LA number, and it's the Rams. And yep, I'm signing a deal. Let's go. You're my number one. My number one called me. I'm going to be a Ram. But now he's got to actually follow through and he's got to make the team. But this is something that the confidence of that, of like, oh, I'll make all the teams. They just don't know me yet. I'm just from Delaware, right? When you're from Delaware, they're not going to know about you till you go show them. And I love that. And you know what he does? He goes and he shows them, and he makes the team. As an undrafted free agent, he sneaks onto the roster for the 2019 Rams, and he will stay on the Rams for 3 years. He will be pressed into action by that first October 2019. Injuries come in, and he actually has to make a start. He's a full-time starter by the start of the 2021 season. After I think Corey Littleton was gone by then, Littleton was still on the Rams, so he actually got to directly learn from Littleton after having studied him from afar for so long. And of course that 2021 season was magical. He was a starting linebacker on a Super Bowl team. He gets to go win his ring, but he will not get another contract from the Rams. That was the last year of his deal and they'll let him walk. But hey, I get to go stay in LA and I'm going to be a Charger. And that's what he was last year. He went and helped Brandon Staley, who was of course there for the 2020 season with Troy Reader. He got to go to LA there to the Chargers and help Staley teach the young guys and stuff. In the 2021 or the 2022 season. And that brings him here where he is again, something of an underdog. He is not going to be a starter. Those two spots are, unless you count third linebacker as a starter, but I don't think in this defense that's really prudent because when they go into their base, it'll be Dean Lowry. But either way, he's fighting for his spot now. You know, he's going to have to go make it on special teams, go be that underdog, kind of have that mentality and fight against guys that also have that I'm a special teamer, dirty work kind of guy mentality. And somebody like Troy Dye or, you know, undrafted free agents and stuff that are going to try to sneak on their roster in special teams. Well, if they do, guess who's getting knocked off? So that is the teetering place where Troy Reader's career is. And he's kind of got the perfect mentality to handle that whichever way it goes. And I think when you go through someone's upbringing like this, you do get a sense for the mentality that creates in a person. And I think that is no clearer than with Patrick Jones, who we will get to next. Bear with me for a second while I explain to you Soroban. Soroban is a Japanese competitive math thing. It's also the name for the device that they use. It's a Japanese abacus. And in competitive Soroban, there are a bunch of letters a bunch of numbers flashed up on a screen, like 3-digit numbers. And they're really, really, really fast. And you're shown all these numbers and then you have to add them up. And the more you get right, the better you do. The reason I tell you this is because in 6th grade, Patrick Jones won a Soroban competition. He was just one of those kids that excels at everything you put in front of him. Like, I cannot think of a thing that is further away from the mind that you need in football. I guess the quick thinking is something, but the skills that football require and the skills that Soroban require are very, very far apart. And Patrick Jones was better than any of the other kids at both of them. Demonstrably so. The other reason is to illustrate where he came from. He was born on a military base in Yokosuka, Japan. And then when he was 3 years old, his family moved to Jacksonville. And then not too long after that, they went back to Italy, to Naples. I think he was like 7. and then to Misawa, which is on the northern tip of the island. So they were back in Japan, and then eventually back to Yokosuka. They moved around quite a bit, and they've got all these keepsakes around the house about of the places that they've been. If you look at Patrick Jones, like his bio on like Pitt's website, it'll say like Chesapeake, Maryland is his hometown. His hometown is not any one place. He is from everywhere. He's a kid that moved around a lot, and that meant a lot of different experiences. And so when he was growing up, he played a lot of different sports, did a lot of different things, and he was really good at all of it. Just one of those kids that's just really good at whatever ball he picks up. He can be the best one at throwing it around. But as much as he was good at all the other stuff, by the time he got to high school, to Kinnick High School, which is on the military base, and he joins the high school football team there, it grips him like none of this other stuff ever had. His first practice, it was like his humid day. He was behind all day trying to figure out the drills because he didn't join it the same day everybody else did. And the practice goes like an hour long. It's just his absolutely miserable day, and he could not have loved it more. He was so excited to like come back the next day. Now he's doing 4 practices a day, doing it all, all in right away. There's this great anecdote from the first day that they put on pads, and he's like trying to figure out the pads. Like he's, the first time you put on pads, it takes a little bit of figuring to figure out how it all goes in. And then he pops into an Oklahoma drill and he beats a 220-pound O lineman. Like it's just natural to him. Like everything was natural to him. And the excitement that he had about it was truly unlike anything else. There's also, I should tell you about at Kinnick High School, for training camp every year for like 4 days, they would go to the base of Mount Fuji, where there's a Marine camp there, and they would stay there as a physical challenge, a kind of a harden your soul kind of thing, but also like a team building bonding trip. Patrick Jones had been to Mount Fuji a couple times before. He would, run up and down, and he was like super cocky, the way that a young kid is going to feel kind of invincible. He didn't dress for it right, ends up getting hypothermia. So this time when he's there with his teammates, he'll dress properly. He'll take it seriously. And one of the things is they'll like group up the team and then say, last one to the summit's a rotten egg. So they all get up 5 a.m. They start climbing. Guess whose group gets first? That is something that Patrick Jones still smiles about to this day. Also, if you ask him what the hardest thing he ever had to do is, he won't say anything regarding football. It's Soroban. That's the hardest thing he's ever done. So take that for whatever you will. But he had always dreamed of becoming an NFL player. Football gripped him as much as anything else. But I mean, one of those little boys that says, I'm going to be in the NFL, right? And one time in elementary school, he was actually filling out one of those, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said NFL player. And his teacher said, that's not realistic, and actually wrote it on the paper, which is they now still have framed. I don't know if it was in his childhood bedroom for a while. I don't know if they still have it or if it's in some attic somewhere or whatever. But what a crazy thing to hear from a teacher. But it kind of wasn't that crazy of a take because from Japan, from Kinnick High School or the Yokosuka military base in general, you didn't really have a lot of recruiters looking at you. That is not typically where college recruiters are going to be searching for NFL talent. Kinnick High School in Yokosuka, Japan, all the way across the Pacific. In fact, in the coach's whole time there coaching, he had 7 players even ever go to college. Forget the pros. 2 of them were Division I. I mean, this was just not a thing that happened. But Patrick Jones was a special kid for that program. And sure enough, he gets to go to D1. He goes to Pitt and sort of blossoms there as he finishes kind of growing and filling out. He's like 6'5" now, true edge rusher sized. And he was a 2-star recruit, not somebody that you would really expect to change your program or anything like that. But by the time he was a senior, he was up for all ACC awards, and he was one of the core members of the Pittsburgh Panthers and eventually a 3rd-round pick for the Minnesota Vikings, where he's carved out a role for himself here too. Patrick Jones is in one of the most stable places on that whole defensive line where a lot of jobs are in jeopardy and a lot of competitions are happening. Kind of seems like Patrick Jones is here to squeeze gaps and break down pulling guards, and that is his job. Obviously, No job is ever safe in the NFL, especially for a third round pick going into the final year. His third year, right? Is the second to last year of a rookie contract. But whatever happens with Patrick Jones, he has been such a renaissance man to get to this point. It's kind of funny that when you ask somebody about Patrick Jones, they don't really have, it's like a kind of a flat opinion, like, oh, he's just kind of there. And that's so unfairly boring of a way to talk about a guy that is so unbelievably interesting. So here's the deal for tomorrow. I will not be able to cover whatever happens live. So if there's a big extension or if any big news happens, I'll have to handle it on Monday. You're going to get another pre-recorded one of these because I will be on a plane all day. So I will talk to you, I guess, tomorrow with a show that I will record right after I finish this one. And then I'll really talk to you on Monday, and then I'll actually be on the road and eventually in Minnesota for training camp. So I'll be able to cover it for you guys then. So I'm really excited about that. I hope that you guys enjoy the actual firsthand look. I'll be up there watching what happens, and I'll be able to give you a little bit more of an informed take than just, hey, the beat writers seem to like this guy a lot, right? Like, I'm going to go check on that Nailor thing and see if I really agree with all the hype. But whether I do or not, I hope to see you there and we can all discuss it together. I'll see y'all then. And as always, Skol.